We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us, talking about the idea of banning books in schools, which is a reality to some degree based on some of the legislation passed here in Tennessee, with Ken Paulson. He's at MTSU Free Speech Center there, and it's always good to have him on. And Ken, we've got someone who waited through the break. We'll take her call and continue our conversation. Let's go to Wilma. Wilma, good morning. Hi, Wilma.
Hello in there.
Hey.
Mr. Paulson, I appreciate you continuously coming to this public forum that we have here in Middle Tennessee and sharing with us, because to me that's the essence of democracy. I want to comment on your earlier caller bringing up a book like Kite Runner. I've seen the movie. I've not read the book. It was a very intense movie, and I think if you don't have access to stuff like that, I think the people behind this quote-unquote so-called movement would much rather somebody to think that maybe that they were abused because they had done something wrong in the eyes of God, and that was their punishment, that they weren't the victim, that they were guilty of something that they didn't do, and their abuser got off scot-free. We've gone through eons and eons of that on this planet, and I think we've come to a point to say, no, to sexually abuse a child is wrong, and that child shouldn't internalize those feelings thinking it's them.
Right.
They would much rather cite some fundamentalist principle instead of critical thinking and emotional IQ building. But, here we are. We've got our state legislature that acts more like the Tennessee Taliban than there are in a democracy. I really think that this movement is to cover up stuff that we never really talk about, like super secret PACs. You never hear anybody go into those. You don't know who's behind them. You could have people like Jeffrey Epstein putting money into stuff like this, Pablo Escobar, El Chapo, all these people, all these prostitution, child pornography ring type of people laundering their money to get special political deals. But you won't hear these people pushing this ridiculous ban book stuff talk about the real issues, and that's it. I think this is all a major distraction and a push, and it's probably coming from secret PAC money kind of deals, and it's all about politics. And if you know your Bible, you know that politics is, in essence, is a work of Satan. So I'll hang up on that one.
All right. Thank you, Wilma, for your call. Go ahead, Ken. Any thoughts?
I'm impressed by the passion you generate in your audience at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, right, right? That's a good call.
I was thinking here about the Kite Runner and other books, and I wish it weren't the end of a school year, because it occurs to me that it would be relatively easy to enlist school teachers in assigning as extra credit a book report on mouse, and then compiling 500 students' takes on that book. Mm-hmm. And then you would see immediately the impact of that book. What's missing from this whole equation is there's all this discussion about a naked mouse and a suicide in mouse, but there's no discussion about what really enters kids' brains in terms of developing compassion, understanding of the world, a recognition of social injustice and the need to make this a safer world. And if you had 500 word essays, it would capture that. And it's so hard to refute people saying these books are bad without amassing evidence that they are extraordinarily good.
I'm trying to think about how and who these book bans will impact and harm the most potentially among our children. And I don't know, I want your thoughts on this, because I'm thinking, at least from my perspective as a father, if any of these Republican or lawmakers that vote for these book bans want to ban a book, not a single one of them can tell me what my son reads, period. They can go jump in the lake. They can ban something, and I'm going and buying the book they banned, and I'm handing it to my son and suggesting that he read it, because I'm an engaged parent, and I'm going to make sure that no buffoon that wants to ban a book that I think is going to help my son is not available to him. However, we know there are so many children, intelligent children, that don't have parents that are as engaged, that are not not going to pay attention like I would, out of both what I think is best for my son and, frankly, spite, because it would piss me off. They're the ones who are going to suffer the most, I think, the kids who do not have the active parental involvement to make sure they're exposed to a lot of this material that the parents first sign off on. What do you think?
Well, I agree with that. Sadly, the ones who actually suffer the most are those who are the others, the students who are minority students in their world. I'm not just talking about racial minority. They may be children with disabilities. They may be children with overriding anxiety, and certainly could be children who are just beginning to understand and explore their sexuality, and just trying to get a handle on it. Why do they feel strange? That's what's been so appalling about so many of the books. You look at the list, and it's anything that would allow a child to learn more about himself or herself. Why in the world would you remove from a high school library a book about adolescent sexuality, explaining what's happening with the body? It is maddening to me that there are people who want to limit, for example, sex education, because as we all know, it's much better for teenagers to know nothing and to get into trouble. I mean, it's so insane. The kids who suffer most are the ones who need this information, who need these perspectives the most. And it's actually tragic.
So what do you think happens if the kids make their way through, as you say, in that tragic scenario, once they get to college? What does this set these kids up for? Now, at some point you go, if they go on to college, but if they do, at that point, having not been exposed, now in college you have a lot more freedoms and choices. But if you haven't had some of that foundation coming out of the lower level schools, what impact does that have? And maybe beyond, once they become, functioning members of society out in the workplace.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money when you talk about after school. I mean, if a child has been sheltered and knows nothing about the world except his or her race, his or her faith, his parents' beliefs, when that child gets even to high school, but certainly to college, they're going to be outsiders. They're going to be looked at as people who don't know anything. They're as out of step as being judgmental, as being limited in intellectual ability. You can't just lock your mind up in a box. And then beyond that, then they go to college, and if they get through that, then they become adults and wait until that time when they have children and they can go ban books themselves. It is a cycle, and it has to stop.
Okay, as we go to the break, I just want you to contemplate and answer when we get back, because I think the big fear for some of us as we see this happening, if something like this were to be taking hold, you talk about them being the outsiders. What I don't want it to do is get to the point where there are so many of them, the ones who did have access to the books are the ones who are the outsiders, that are the ones that are then maybe railed against. And that's what we don't want to have happen. See what we think moving forward with Ken Paulson. We'll take a break and be back with that in our final segment right after this.